Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. This is episode 547. We're recording this live on Friday, the 13th of November, around 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. I've got a really great panel. I've got some great stories. I think we're in a feast of WordPress and internet articles and opinions coming up. We've got two great guests. I'm still classifying Heather as a guest, but next week she will be officially a full-time member of the panel. And we've got returning Brian Gardner. Brian, thank you so much for agreeing to come back. Unfortunately, Brian can't stay with us for the whole of the show. He's got to deal with some personal matters around the pandemic, but not too terrible though. But he's part of the country's going through a terrible period, but I wish them all the best, and I'm sure the panel also wishes anybody that's suffering from the pandemic at the present moment a speedy recovery and a recovery for their friends and family. Before we go into the main parts of the show, I want to talk about our great sponsor, that's Kinsta. Kinsta Hosting. If you've got a WordPress website, a WooCommerce, a learning management system, anything that needs more power, more reliability, Kinsta's a good place to look at it for yourself and for your clients. So I suggest you go over to Kinsta, have a look at their packages. I suggest also that you should buy one. If you do that, please mention that you heard about Kinsta on the WP-Tonic show. So let's go straight into our first story. Themes team removes update, CSS guidelines, adds stricter requirements for links and content. These titles are getting longer and longer from the tavern. I don't know. Sally, what did you think of this one?
It sounds like one of those overdue moves. I think that making the content links, etc., more specific is probably a good idea, since we had that little snafu a while ago. I've never submitted a theme to the repo, so I wasn't even aware that, there were certain classes that you had to include and etc. So I don't know that this is going to be all that dramatic in results. Even the comments are fairly mild relative to some of what we see on the tavern.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Brian?
I'm in an interesting stage right now in my WordPress career.
Are you, Brian?
Tell us.
Tell us more, Brian.
Yeah, you heard it here. No, I obviously been doing themes since, 2007. And back then was about the only time that I had ever been submitting themes to the repository. And of course, back then it was like WPThemes.net or something like that. And then, a few years after that, we launched Studio Press and everything was premium. And so therefore we didn't have to sort of adhere to any of those requirements, albeit Gary Jones, a very talented member of the Genesis community and greater WordPress community, always insisted that .sticky and .by comment author or whatever the other class was always within our style sheets, and they were always empty and stuff like that. I've got a love-hate relationship right now with theming and WordPress and all of the changes and all of the requirements. And to be perfectly honest, my next sort of gig, the current gig that I launched just recently, is sort of WordPress theme agnostic in the sense, because I just didn't have the stomach anymore to sort of jump through all of the hoops and with all of the changes. I'm like, I'm 46. I've been running with this crowd for how long? And I just, things felt so stable, relative to where they're at now, and everything's moving. And it just, to me, it's kind of like ad blindness when I see an article like that. Now I'm like, whatever, because that's the least of any of all the worries that I think are about to go down with things being delayed and things being pulled in and pulled out. And so I, to be perfectly honest, I don't have many thoughts about it, because I'm kind of past that stage of my life within WordPress to give it too much thought.
Well, that's really interesting in its own way that you say that. And you're coming on my other podcast in the near future to talk about your new product and service on you. I'm looking forward to that and to hear more about it. So You're not going to totally give up on WordPress. That'd be ridiculous, Brian. You are the granddaddy. Oh, you're the granddaddy of WordPress, Brian.
Yes, no, I'm not leaving WordPress right now. I have over the last couple of years in my angst days have said, I'm going to just build a CMS. I'm going to find someone to build a lightweight, minimalist CMS because I feel like and the Tavern is a great vehicle to learn about all of the new things. But some of the things that I see coming through, like blocks for this and blocks for that, I'm like, okay, this is getting out of hand. This is too many things for too many people. It misaligns with just my general philosophy of less is more and stuff like that. And so I'm very conflicted. And I've probably been no further away from considering other CMSs than I've been right now. Like, I just got to be perfectly honest. It's just, it's the most popular thing, which is why everyone's using it, but they're trying to get more people. And, like, I appreciate Matt and everything that he has done specific to my life and the trajectory it went because of WordPress. But right now it sometimes feels like a hot mess. And like,
sometimes it is a hot mess.
Well, it is hot. It is a hot mess.
And I think that,
mess,
yes. Yeah. Also, I think trying other content management systems. I mean, part of the reason that WordPress is where it is on account of looking at other content management systems and realizing that, WordPress is deficient in some ways, and therefore, changing the trajectory a lot in ways that I think mostly are ultimately good, but that make for a pretty awkward transition.
What did you think, Chris? Is he with us or is he frozen? Oh, I think he's frozen. After over to Stephen. What did you think, Stephen? Oh, he's back. Oh, he's back. He's back again. Shall we go back to Chris? What did you think of this, Chris?
And you're looking very mod there.
Or is it Bono?
No, the thing I would just add to this is that I recently had an audit done to some of our sites, and this idea of underlining links came up and having it be an accessibility feature. And once I really wrapped my head around it, I was pretty sold on it. And
for a while.
Yeah, I know it's not new. And I realized that especially for the visually impaired, the way we were doing links, they just weren't visible. So I'm kind of behind some standards here for sure.
Yeah.
But what did happen though is if we made it a global situation, a lot of the non-content links, it was just too much underlined. But I see in the guidelines of addressing that. I think it's a good move. I mean, going back to a simpler linked internet, just as a standard sounds cool, and definitely dissuading, links that are kind of for intentionally trying to be hidden inside the content and just making a link. I'm okay with that kind of decision.
All right, what did you think, Stephen?
Yeah, anything to move the world forward in accessibility, I think, is a good move. And the interesting thing, kind of that Chris was bringing up, is that accessibility often leads to an interesting thing with simplicity. That it's oftentimes when people get a little too complex, things become less and less accessible. And so I think there is this cool thing that will be happening is that as we start thinking through simplicity, you also become more, it's more accessible for everybody. If things become more accessible, things become more simple. And I mean, if you look at this article too about just some of the updates and stuff, WordPress is always, updating, changing things, a lot less controversial than the JavaScript update, which is also an article here. But it's necessary and important to keep pushing things forward. And WordPress can do a lot by pushing things in the accessibility direction, since so many websites use WordPress.
That's great. It'd be okay, Heather, if I move to story 2 and you can start off story 2. She's nodding her head, bless her heart. That's good. It's nice to have cooperative panelist members. It's an unusual experience for me, though. But there we go. Our discount, you discount, we both lose. So, Heather, what did you think of this one? You're still muted, Heather.
Sorry. So yeah, like I think that the idea is that you get into this cycle of everybody discounting everything, and that you need to charge for your services the way that I mean, you can't just keep if everybody decides this is what something costs, then we can't undercut each other, and that's what we keep getting into. Like, okay, well, if you're going to charge 99 cents for something, then I'm going to charge 98 cents. Well, then I have to charge 97 cents, and then oh well, suddenly nobody's making any profits. And instead, if we all just agree that like this thing is worth the amount of money that it costs to make, and it's worth the profit that, I mean, it's worth your profit on top of it, then we all do well. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that's been going on forever, and it actually ties into another story we're going to talk about too. But yeah, I mean, I completely agreed with.
So Brian, pricing, it's a nightmare, isn't it? And I don't know, when you were running Studio Press, what your policy about Cyber Friday, Black Monday, all these days. What was your philosophy around discounting and special discounted days?
And I would say this if he was sitting next to me, so I'm comfortable with this.
Are you, Brian? I can quickly make you uncomfortable, Brian. I have an uncanny knack of being able to do that.
So Brian Clark from Copyblogger was the CEO of our company back in the day. The very early stages of Studio Press were all me and whatever I decided to do. But once I merged into Copyblogger, the marketing, the promotions, all of that stuff sort of fell in his lap. So we very often and frequently capitalized on Black Friday sales. And then even I think once or twice a year, we would do like a Pro Plus, like totally blowout type of thing. And it usually hinged around wanting to grab a bunch of cash, within a week span, right? Hey, let's do it for that purpose. I have a love-hate relationship with the idea of pricing down and discounting and slashing and stuff like that. In fact, I got so angry about it a couple months ago. I wrote a post about commercial distancing, which was about the race to the top versus the race to the bottom, and how just the nature of, and I think Heather was saying, just undercutting. And I'm like, you get to a point where you're selling for something that you're angry about selling it for because you feel undervalued. And all of a sudden someone bought a theme for $29 and I have to support them for, endlessly. Right. And so I think on some level, and it's tough because no one wants to be the guy that says, I'm sticking to my price at regular price, because then he watches everybody else, undercut and go, Black Fridays. And to be honest, the Black Friday for Studio Press were always the biggest money grabs for the entire year. So it always helped. And especially as we headed into the holidays, we turned a lot of that revenue into employee bonuses and things like that. So on some level, we were almost sort of not forced into running them, but it just became an expectation, right? You set a trend or a precedent that this is what Studio Press did every year Black Friday. And then the year that you didn't, everyone's like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, why didn't you do that? And so pricing.
Well, you also always had a lifetime, pay for it only once model, which was great for those of us buying.
Yes.
But turns out, not always to be so wonderful for the people.
Well, my position on that, Sally, is that I think lifetime deals do have a place, but they should be aimed at the professional audience. And it should be clearly stated, you get this deal, but we don't supply support. You're the professional. You've got, if the thing collapses, you can contact us and we might help you. But fundamentally, you're not going to get lifetime support because you're supposed to be a professional developer and you're supposed to be able to sort it out. That's why you're getting a fantastic lifetime deal. And I also think on certain days, just to increase cash flow, it's quite, to me, it's quite okay to offer a substantial discount for a very small period of time. What I think, and I'm not picking on them, but one was iThemes. I just thought that iThemes in the end, actually, they were the poster child of discounting at you just didn't know what the price of anything they supplied was going to be, because they were always discounting. But they did build up a very successful business, and they managed to sell it to Liquid Web. So who am I to criticise? And what do you think, Chris? Has he gone? I think he's got off me, hasn't he? You're frozen again, Chris. I don't know what he's up to.
It's all the snow on the lines up in.
Yeah, I think it is actually. I don't think he knows. He looks very handsome in that static position.
I love the glasses.
Yeah, I do. He looks like Bono, doesn't he? So, Stephen, what do you think?
Discounts are a part of like a marketing strategy. So if that is something that works into your business model, like by all means do discounts whenever you want to do discounts. Black Friday is a great way to do it. The one nice thing about doing Black Friday discounts around Black Friday is that people are in a buying mood. And I have seen a lot of people pick things up that they don't ever actually use just because it's a good deal. And they think that in 6 months, I might use it. So I'm going to get it now. And that's really where you can make tons of money, especially as like a software company, is people buying stuff then not needing that support later on. But if the discounts don't factor into your business model and don't create the profit that you're looking for or the profit margins, it feels like there's this pressure, this expectation from other people that like you have to do a discount. Like you don't. Like be your own person, be your own company, and compete the way that you want to compete. If you're not doing discounts, you have to compete on a different level. You need to find that spot or that niche to compete in. But if one company is a heavily discounted company and another company positions themselves as a premium company and doesn't do discounts, I think you'll see two different markets going to both of those people, and they can both play very successfully in that area.
So, Sally, I think the other thing, Sally, I think there were some companies that offered lifetime deals with lifetime support. I think WooCommerce was one of those, and he's behind. Oh, right, I always knew there was a relationship between Heather and Chris. Does your husband know this, Heather? So is it a free? Oh no, I'm not going to go there. I'm sorry. Sorry, Sally. Sally. So lifetime deals with lifetime support. I think WooCommerce found that was not a fantastic idea.
I mean, even Studio Press is moving to an annual subscription model. I had some discussions with some of the team over at WP Engine about some of it. It's like, you got to make it clear to me, like, where the value proposition is if I'm going to pay that, because compared to similar things, that also do have, annual subscription fees, that's a high fee. And I don't know what is in it that I'm, going to be getting that I wouldn't otherwise be getting. And it's like, if I know it's worth it to me, I'll pay for it. I mean, I want people who make things I like to stay in business. If what they need to do is change their business model so that they don't go broke, offering support of a kind that they can't afford to, because, they never thought that they would be that popular or, whatever, then, that happens. People will grumble. I may be one of the people who grumbles. People complained a lot when WooCommerce changed, but, when Elliott Condon switched the business model for new purchases of ACF Pro, people mostly applauded him, and some of the old customers, despite being grandfathered in, went and paid for the new license.
I can see why you're using that, but I think that was not, I wasn't going to say unusual, but I think it was priced so ridiculously cheap when he did it. And he's such a great person, and he's got such a great reputation.
I mean, if people don't like you, they're not going to do that. So you can't count on everybody falling all over themselves to give you more money.
It's a bit like, I'm not gonna inflate Brian's ego anymore, actually, but it's a bit like if Brian did something, Brian's built up a lot of community goodwill over the years, and he's seen as a fair and decent guy. I hope your ego's building up, Brian. Thank you, Brian. But like when he does something, he's going to get a much different response than some other people in the WordPress community, isn't he, Sally?
Yeah, and I think there's more likelihood of complaints when it's, it was automatic that bought WooCommerce, and after
Yeah.
that the prices went up, and
Well, it was the way they did it. It was as tactless as automatic normally do most things.
yeah,
isn't
I
it?
mean, communication is important in these situations.
Something which they've not been fantastic at. So, Brian, I know you've got to be off in the next 5-6 minutes. So, what do you think of some of the points the panelists have made? And I also think the last point, communication, is a good point, because some people, and I don't want you, to put you in a spot, but the way that, well, I'm going to try actually, but Automatic are, the way they dealt with the price increases and the getting rid of the kind of agency level plans when it came to WooCommerce, it was done in their normal lack of communication, I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know that the one precedent I always wanted to set at StudioPress was always default to generosity, which is actually a term coined by ConvertKit. That's one of their values, is just always giving people the benefit of the doubt. So anytime we made any changes, whether it was price increases or at one point we tried making Pro Plus recurring and stuff like that, we always grandfathered people in. That was the default, and it was a non-negotiable. So whatever we did moving forward would have always benefited those who were sort of in the rear view. Here's a very interesting, and this was a very eye-opening encounter when WordPress.com started selling premium themes years ago. We were one of the sort of the early adopters that they wanted to have in there. And so I remember I was going back and forth with Matt Mullenweg about pricing. I was like, well, how do you price this, right? Because you think WordPress.com. And so you immediately start thinking like $5 for a theme, because it's just people who are used to free and all this other stuff. And he says, you can price your theme for $5,000 if you want. And I was like, ha, funny. And he's like, no, I'm serious. He's like, it literally, you price it however you want, and it's the perceived value. You may only sell one or maybe zero, but it's an open market from that perspective. And it was a sort of a jokey thing back in the day, but then like it's always been something that has stuck with me. And especially now as we, are launching our new endeavor, like pricing is very much reflective of the brand. And if you're seen as a discounty company, like there's some hit you take from a reputation standpoint, like, oh, they're the ones that there's always a deal, or I can always get it for less, or I can Google, StudioPress discount codes and look 50% off, that kind of a thing. There's a reputation hit you take by sort of playing that game. And so as we do our next thing, we feel very confident in what we're building, and we realize there's a market for it, and we're going to price it a certain way. We will have introductory pricing, which is different than discounting. Yeah. This is a sort of like a beta group sort of a thing. And then we're not going to discount, and in fact, there will always be a potentially higher price. So get it at our full price now, sort of a mentality. But yeah, pricing has always been, especially with us at StudioPress. I remember I did when I was leaving WP Engine and all of that, I did an interview with WP Tavern, and Jeff asked, like, what is your biggest regret? And the biggest regret from StudioPress's standpoint was that we were transactional, that we never went and did the switch to recurring. Even when WooCommerce did stuff like that, everybody, like, we kind of paved the way to starting it, but we were the ones that never went there. And I remember so many conversations internally. I'm like, guys, we have to do this. We're going to get crushed. This isn't going to sustain, and And the response was always, well, it's the gateway into the kingdom, right? Because we had other products that we were selling sort of within the Copyblogger infrastructure. And I remember even just as we were trying to negotiate with WP Engine, I mean, at the end of the day, it was their response was, this is transactional. Like tomorrow, this could all go away, and there's no expectation of revenue and stuff like that. Of course, we had a 12-year history of it, but still, and the problem is, like, everyone's a Netflix now. Everybody wants to be recurring because that's what the companies that acquire you want, that, all of those things. So I think there are people who are offering products that really even shouldn't be, but they're like, hey, join my membership and do this every month or every year. And so pricing is a can of worms that's very much Pandora's box, when it comes to what's the right way to do it.
Well, thanks for that. I think you've got to be off now, Brian, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a few more minutes. I'm good.
All right, great, right. Well, tell us when you've got to go. So hopefully you come back. I did offer Brian to come on as a regular, but he's busy. But I think you're okay periodically coming back on the panel, aren't you? But you're busy with your new enterprise, which is very understandable. So let's go on to the next story, article, I should say. WordPress 5.6 beta 4 delayed, auto update implementation changed. Yeah, I'm not too surprised. I wonder if old Chris is ever going to come back. Maybe he didn't pay his cable bill.
Right. Well, this is like where we need to cue the entrance of Spencer and some of his remarks about.
Well, he's joining me in an hour's time for an hour's webinar, so he's relaxing his voice, actually, Sally, as I'll say. So there we go. And like spending 3 hours with me is a little bit.
Would be just a bit too much, yes.
It would be, wouldn't it? That's very tactful from you, Sally. I really appreciate it. So,
I swear I've spent 3 hours with you before Jonathan and I survived.
We should go there, actually. Sally, what did you think of this story?
Well, auto updates being a potential issue is hardly something that should surprise anyone. And of course, we had that little bump with 5.3, where some people.
You could call it a bump, but you don't run a service support company, do you?
Right. Well, I was fortunate that I got the actual real update to 5.3, which was released not too far after that.
You lucky woman.
Yes, and not the bizarre alpha update. But clearly, that's a little demonstration that things are not quite ready for prime time yet. And it makes sense to me to delay releasing something until it's ready, rather than try to shoehorn it into a release to meet a schedule which is arbitrary in the first place.
So what do you think of this, Stephen? I think the whole I understand for security patching, and it's nothing is black and white. Most things are not black and white. It's always like shades of grey when it comes to most things. But I've never been a great opponent, apart from the security patches, of auto updates. What's your feelings?
I personally love the idea of auto updates. I think it's a necessary thing to keep the WordPress community moving forward. There's a lot of problems and a lot of grief that happens when people don't update their stuff. And then when they try to update it and you're skipping 2 versions, all of a sudden nothing works because nobody's built a migration path across that many versions of like a plugin or, WordPress core. I've never seen that be an issue before. But just the idea of auto updating everything, I think is a good premise. But there is growing pains because for years, WordPress has never done this. Developers haven't thought about this as they've built things. And so, of course, we see some weird things that are happening that are frustrating. But I think that in the long run, give us 2-3 years, auto updates will be something that happens a lot smoother. People will know what they have to think about before they push an update for their plugin, or WordPress pushes an update out. And once everybody gets on the same kind of bandwagon, I think it'll be a beautiful thing. But until then, we hit some bumps and some snags along the way.
So what do you reckon, Brian? I'm totally disagree with Stephen. I think it's the devil. I think it's the devil's brew myself. But what do you reckon?
Just like everything, there's 2 camps, right? There's the security exploit camp, right? You got to protect the integrity of the WordPress brand even by not being the target of these things. So on some level, people who are rolling WordPress 2 point something, I know with us at StudioPress and Genesis, we thought about doing stuff like that. We always defaulted to, user generated updates. Even if it's just clicking a button. I don't know that I love the idea of, WordPress core doing that is a little bit different than like a plugin or a theme doing it, where there potentially is more user or developer sort of overriding going on, where there might be more instances of, this theme auto update and I lost my CSS or something like that. So with WordPress, I think it's a little bit less of a thing. It's still a little bit creepy sometimes. However, I will say that the managed hosting companies are starting to sort of introduce all of that, right? Which is, hey, your site has been, we've updated your site for you. Of course, that's sort of the nature of managed WordPress hosting, is that you as the consumer don't have to worry about it. So they sort of vet that.
And you hope they've tested it first.
Yes. Yeah. And
Testing.
so there's
Testing,
pieces
testing.
of that are going on, but I don't know. I saw the snafu and I was like, ooh, that sucked. When that happened.
Something that's interesting is it seems like a lot of people are starting to implement like visual testing, like where you update the staging, you update, and then you test this, like visually compare the staging to the live site, like through a computer algorithm, decide what the percentage difference is. And like cPanel just released, I think, a WordPress kit thing that does that, where it will automatically update things in staging and then visually compare. And then if there's an error, it'll be like, hey, human, go fix this.
What do you reckon, Heather? First of all, how's your shoulder, Heather? Are you still taking drugs or?
Yeah, no drugs, but no, it's sore, especially with the cold that's come in. I don't know how cold it is in Reno, but it is. It's very,
it's a lot
very
more
cold.
colder than Las Vegas.
I don't know. I mean, it hit 0 Celsius here.
It's well below 0 at nights here, Heather. You wouldn't like it, I don't think. Got any remarks about this one, or shall we go for our break and on to the next story?
Yeah, just a quick remark. Whenever there's an update, I do have to go through manually. Like, I mean, I have like Pingdom and other things checking my site, but I have to check every page to make sure that it is working. I mean, all the crucial things, like we have all these backlink checkers that are checking to see, like, oh, is the page up? Well, just because it's up doesn't mean that it's there.
That it's not broken?
Yeah. So just because it can be pinged doesn't mean that it's displaying properly, that it doesn't have debug code showing at the top and that the forms all work. So there's definitely a business in that beyond like what I generally do, that have like a whole slew of interns going through and clicking every site.
I think we're going to go for our break, and Brian has to go. We'll be back in a few moments with a decreasing panel, but hopefully the few that are left are going to stay with me. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. So you've got to be off, Brian. Thanks for joining us.
Great to see you.
Yep,
see you later, Brian. What if it looks like Chris is? I'm showing. Oh, he's 5 there. It looks like he gave up on us, Chris. He must have had major technical problems, or he just got fed up, maybe.
Sally, is that a Bengal?
Pardon?
Her cat.
Is that a Bengal?
Oh, the cat.
Oh, Bengal. Oh, I thought it was a Bengal.
Oh, the clink clink. No, that's the kitty. Yes.
Actually, Heather, if the cat appears consistently in the show, my figures go up by double. So obviously the audience is more interested. I learned very quickly the audience is actually more interested in cats. So there we go. Let's go back. We are returning, folks. Unfortunately, Brian had to leave. Like I say, he had a slight family emergency to deal with. Nothing too worrying. So we go on to story 4. And Envato passes the 1 billion in community. This is the story, Heather, that I put in the last minute and didn't tell you about. That's nasty of me, but there we go. But I don't normally do that.
And here I've been trying so hard this week to not drop anything else in the.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was something that had to be spoke about. First of all, they got to $1 billion, which is mind-blowing, isn't it? And also, they seem to be consistently wanting to poach the clientele of the poor people that use their platform. What do you reckon about this one, Stephen?
If you look at any sort of marketplace, that's generally the trend. I mean, like Amazon, right? Like they wait till somebody makes X amount of money off of selling batteries, and then they do Amazon basic batteries. It's just kind of like the next move. It's always a struggle though, trying to make sure, I'm sure it's a struggle, trying to make sure that your customers and your users and everybody is, somewhat happy, but they're generating a ton of revenue and they created an entire marketplace that wasn't there before for themes. So somebody that is selling a theme can do so faster and easier and handle licensing keys and stuff. And so just in creating that marketplace, like even if they are marketing their own thing, like we can see they've created $1 billion worth of revenue generated by developers building plugins or whatever for various different things, designers. I mean, they have tons of assets in all different areas. So I think it's cool that they hit that milestone. And it'll be interesting to see as they keep building out their own products and see where it goes and if it disenfranchises their customer base or not.
Oh, I've got a tip for my listeners and viewers. If you want to move outside a really big city, but you want ideal internet connection, you want to choose a state that's not that populated, but then move to the state capital of that particular state, because the bureaucrats there will make sure that they've got superb internet connection. The rest of the state can go and fuck itself, but they'll make sure that they've got great internet connection, so you'll be okay. You won't drop out of your Zooms. I just thought I'd give you that tip, listeners and viewers.
Chris does not want to be in a city, however.
Well, no, well, normally the capitals of these depopulated states, they're tiny anyway. So they're not normally the main city of the state. Nevada is the perfect example. Heather lives in the biggest city in Nevada. I live in the capital that's got about 35,000 people, but all the state buildings are in Carson City. But I just thought I'd give you that tip, listeners, viewers. So, sorry, Heather, what did you think of this story?
I didn't read it.
No, well, I'm going to let you off that. I'm going to let you off that one. Sally, what did you think of it?
Well, it does sound like that situation that we're hearing about with Amazon, which suggests that, from Envato's perspective, it's the intelligent move for them to make, but it was because of the marketplace that it got its, that it got to where it is. And so that kind of cannibalizing the marketplace plugin and theme authors, it gets to be a little awkward. And, you hope that they can reach some kind of arrangement where the people who have been selling through Envato are happy. Because otherwise, eventually somebody else is going to set up a different marketplace and people are going to start moving there. And then there is going to be less for Envato to offer in their subscriptions.
Well, it does seem a trend, doesn't it? Because
Envato is well known, but they're not Amazon. So it's not like people have no other option.
That is true. That's very true, actually, because I was thinking, Apple had a bit of with the Basecamp people, they had a little bit of a scraping with their community. Obviously Amazon, but you made a good point. They're no Amazon, are they? So there's always the possibility of somebody else, even though it's
as long as they do it before Envato gets to be, at the Amazon level of too big a head start.
Well, I'm just thinking in the market that they're operating in, they probably are too big now, but who knows? So, and by the way, Heather, not reading a story never stopped any of my other panelists passing an opinion on a subject. So you should disqualify yourself because you weren't allowed to read it. Like I say, it never stopped any of the other panelists. It never stopped me about remarking on something. So on to story 5. WordPress 5.6 will ship with another major jQuery change. Oh God! Do you want to comment on this one, Heather? I hope it doesn't go the way that the last one went. We've had a bit of recently. The updates and the methodology of updating the core hasn't been as good as it's been pretty rock solid for a long while, and then we've had a turbulence. That's the way to put it. We've had some turbulence ever. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever you're updating anything, I mean, so there's a lot of people that have the auto updates turned on and they just trust them and everything works fine. And that's good because the beta track is really good. But, and that's again, from the earlier story to make sure that like everything's okay before it gets into the main track. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like everybody's doing their due diligence before everything gets into the main track. So I'm not too fussed about it.
What do you reckon, Stephen?
It's a necessary thing, right? Keep pushing JavaScript forward. I mean, we can't stay in the dark ages forever, but I've had several people reach out when they updated their WordPress and be like, hey, my site completely broke. It's like, oh, well, I know exactly why that is. Like, migrate isn't there. jQuery migrate isn't there anymore. And so you install a plugin, everything's back to normal. But the problem that several of our customers are in is that they had custom themes developed by shops that I think no longer exist or they don't have a relationship with anymore. And really, if they're going to fix this issue, they're going to have to rebuild a custom theme again, probably almost from the ground up, because there's a lot of user interaction stuff going on that is built on really old jQuery stuff. And people often have this idea that like you build it and it's going to work forever on the internet, and that is not the case. Like the internet is a living, breathing thing that is always changing, always evolving. And if you just build something and let it sit, eventually that thing is going to stop working and the user experiences are going to degrade over time. I think it's a good move. I like how WordPress has planned it out. I like how they've communicated it, but a lot of people don't listen and a lot of people don't care until their websites stop working. And knowing,
well,
try to install another jQuery plugin to try to keep it going for a little bit longer until someday the whole entire website goes down. And then what do? Try to rebuild the theme as fast as you can. Like if you don't pay attention to things now, it's going to just get worse and worse as time goes on. And this is a great article that just kind of talks about that a little bit more.
It is kind of tough though, because it's like, all right, you would hope that the developer community, the ones who are still actively making the themes and plugins would be paying attention to this, would get some of the warnings, would start trying to either upgrade things or, rebuild them or retire them or, whatever the best choice for them is. But of course, there are a lot of people out there who they're not like part of the WordPress community. They're not tuned into the news. It would be not that easy for them to hear that this was happening or to have the faintest idea what it would mean that jQuery is changing. And then, suddenly their site updates and it's broken and they don't know what's going on. And yeah, maybe there are things they have installed that are not supported anymore. And they run into trouble. And Jonathan's probably seen a lot more of that than I have. But I was recently checking on something for a client that I built a site for in 2012 or 2013, a long time ago in internet years. And it's like, whoa, there is stuff on your site that like has not been updated for like probably since, it's just like, it wasn't that the owner wasn't installing updates. It was that those particular plugins had been discontinued at some point. And so I, replaced a bunch of them with similar things that did. But if you haven't got anyone knowledgeable, if something simply is not being updated, you don't get the same sort of warnings as you do when there's an update for something and you need to install it.
Well, like I took over one client recently, and I'm obviously not going to name it, but it's a quasi-profit, non-profit organization, one of these strange American concoction of private and public.
We do have some odd categories of business.
Oh dear. It's a national organisation, and we went in, and it's really important, their website, because they tick all the subscriptions through it and everything. And I said, where's the documentation? They said to me, well, what documentation? I said, well, I said, about...
Well, yeah, no doubt that when they hired whoever built it, they didn't want to pay for documentation or training.
No, but first of all, listeners to views, you should get some documentation developed. And just don't rely on one person in your organization. What happens if they get disgruntled or they leave? Secondly, I just don't think that's a great idea. I think you should have a support company. I would say that. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's my honest opinion. If the website is actively making you reasonable money, you got to treat it. Any business needs maintenance, updating equipment, anything.
Maintenance on your freaking photocopier,
Exactly. It's no different. So I think we go on to story 6. Have we got enough time, or shall we go in? No, I think we better go for our recommendations. Or what do you reckon, panel? I think shall we touch on story 6?
Sure, let's. It's a lengthy article, but we may not have to be. We may not need to be doing quite such a perorating in our discussion.
So, what did you think of it, Sally? It's a typical one from the master of SEO, but it was a little bit long, but. He tends to waffle a bit, but there tends to be a bit of truth in what he says. What did you reckon about it?
Well, I can possibly sum up the article in 2 words. It depends. But and of course, that's it. That's an old consultant's joke. Anyway, being a consultant, of course, I'm in favor of hiring consultants for appropriate tasks. But it's, I think he's got a decent breakdown of areas where it makes more sense to hire employees and areas where it makes more sense to work with consultants. Although it's interesting that he suggests, somewhere he has a list of tasks that are kind of appropriate for consultants, and the way he describes them seems a little odd because several of them are ongoing types of tasks, including SEO. It's not like it's a like one and done thing, but and he includes a bunch of responses from people who've said, hey, but this is why we prefer employees to consultants. And I have personally run into that issue about you have to manage how your internal team is going to respond to hiring a consultant. And the degree to which that may be, especially hiring a consultant for something that you would otherwise have had that team do, and the politics of it can be tricky. And it can be tricky for the consultant who probably has no idea of internal politics. I mean, you can guess that there might be teams whose toes you are in danger of stepping on.
I'm going to throw this over to Heather, who's got an extensive amount of experience, but the little bit of experience I've got of it, the politics of any organization, as a consultant, you've got to grasp that as quickly as possible. Heather, what do you reckon about this article?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, like Sally said. You have to know what role needs to be a full-time employee, what type of company that you are, and when the value is to bring in a consultant. So one of the things that my longtime business partner likes to say is, if you were stranded on a desert island, or deserted island rather, and you had the option of having a coach, a mentor, a consultant, or a contractor with you, like who would you have to help you get off the island? And you can have all of them at different parts, but only one at a time. And like figuring out who you need in your business at different points Like that's the key. So like when you first get on the island, like maybe you want that, maybe you need that mentor, or maybe you need that contractor right then, because you just need somebody that can like do the job really quickly to get the wood to help you strike a fire. But then you need like a consultant to help you strike a plan, so that you know, like, okay, here's the roadmap that I'm going to follow because you've done this before. But then eventually you just want like a coach to help you keep going every day while you're following that plan, because like you already had the contractor to get like the little stuff done, and you already have the plan set out by somebody that's done it before. But like eventually you're going to get off the island yourself. So it's knowing at what point in your business do you need the right people.
Oh, I thought that was excellent. I'll give you top stars for that one, Heather. I think we just go. I'm going to cut you off, Stephen. I think we're going to go into the recommendations of the week. I haven't got one. But I've been quite good recently. I think I have got maybe a good one for next week. So, Stephen, have you got anything you could recommend to the listeners and viewers? Please say
I haven't
yes.
stumbled across anything too crazy this week, except we did just launch a free trial. So if you head over to zipfish.io, we'll optimize your site for free. And you can test it out for a month to see if you what kind of speed increases you can get, and then how that affects and impacts your users using your site, and if you can increase your revenue by that. So check that out.
All right, I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Sally, you got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
I would recommend, I spent 2 days this week at Smashing Conf SF.
Oh, yes, how was that?
It was terrific. And here's the thing. I mean, by the time I was, able to recommend it last week, of course, it would, it's not likely too many people would be able to get to that one, but they have several. And they do online events really well. My only complaint is that Hopin, the platform that they've been using, does not have anything built in to handle your virtual background. But they are really good at getting people involved. They give you a lot of virtual swag. We all had these cute little badges with cats on them, and we were supposed to trade them and check them out and see who's badge matched, who else is who had the same mascot character or didn't, or who had a unique one. They gave me a burrito cat trying to wrap my head around things, which is pretty accurate. And of course they're all cat fans.
What could you ask for?
Well, right. So it was great for me. So share your cat or dog pictures in the Slack channel. A lot of good Q&A and discussion.
It tells you everything you need to know about the group you're with. Those are the cat levels,
Well, share your cats, share a picture of the view out your window, your plants. So there was some opportunity for everybody. You don't have to be a cat person, although I think that probably does make it easier. Somebody was doing a presentation, I only caught part of it, on new dev tools in Microsoft Edge, of all places, and they were actually pretty cool. I have not had a time to check them out because, of course, the thing that you need most immediately after a 2-day conference is sleep, and I was impressed. A lot of the people who were doing moderating and hosting were in Europe, and it's like, and it's 4 a.m. for them, and they're still managing to be fairly perky and alert. So it was a fun event. I met, because it was theoretically the San Francisco area conference, I met a bunch of really cool people in this area that I hadn't known before.
That's great. Sounds great. So you would recommend it?
I would say yes. Just go. I mean, find one where that's happening at times that are reasonable for you, and buy a ticket and go. It costs much less to go to the online version than the offline version. So if you'd thought about going previously, but it just couldn't fit in your budget, this will give you a chance. It's never going to be the same as going to an in-person event, but I think they've done extremely well on keeping some of the spirit and the feeling.
Very well. Heather, got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
I just want to recommend, like as Thanksgiving is coming up, to go to your local CSAs. So, and I know that it's very difficult for people right now as they're planning solo Thanksgivings, but be ever mindful of using our wonderful things like Zoom to have Friendsgivings with each other. So virtual Thanksgiving. There are a lot of restaurants that are doing like home kits so that you don't have to cook a whole thing for yourself or your smaller group that is with yourself. And then you can celebrate together on a big screen on your TV. So yeah, just check out all of the options that you have available to help your restaurants, help your local firms, help your local people stay in business and stay inside.
I think that was fantastic. Thanks for that, Heather. I never thought of that. So Stephen, what's the best way for people who wants to find out more about you and what you're up to in your services, Steve?
Head over to zipfish.io and run a speed test and see how fast we can make your website.
That's great. And Sally, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and what you're up to?
If you can spell my name, you can find me. I am at Sally Getch on Twitter and Instagram. WP Fangirl, most other places. WPFangirl.com is the business URL. And so, yep, if you can't find my contact info, you're not trying hard enough.
There we go. And Heather, how can people find out more about you and what you are up to?
I am Heathriel everywhere on the internet. So just look for Heathriel and you'll find me.
That's great. Thanks, panel. I think it's been a great show. Obviously, we lost a few people on the windy road of this episode, but it was great to see Brian again, and hopefully Chris will join us next week. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye.